Welcome back. It's me, Mark Hopkins, and this is It Starts With You podcast. And this is a really interesting one for me because I get to speak to an engineering director that I've known for quite some time. And in the past, we've had many conversations around recruitment and engineering and a few other bits and bobs, and I'm trying to punt my business at him a few times. But also an extremely interesting guy. We've had really kind of great conversations, especially with some of the content I put out. And one of the things he watched on my website was one of my videos about the career Mandela effect. If you've not seen it, I'll put the link in the about section wherever this podcast may land. In it, I theorise that we're all victims of a career Mandela effect. If you don't know what the Mandela effect is, have a little Google of it. It's basically a phenomenon that is folklore, myth, I don't know what to call it. I'm not a huge believer in conspiracy theories and stuff like that, but with this, people think that our memories are not serving us right and something's changing. We're moving in parallel universes or time travel or something like that, and certain elements of society has changed. And the Mandela effect, where it comes from, is everyone thought Nelson Mandela died in the 80s. And in fact, he was still alive, and he died in the last couple of years. Well, I say the last couple of years. I've not googled when he died actually, but he's died. Died in more modern times than in the 80s. And that created a conspiracy theory of the Mandela effect. And in the video that I create, I touch upon a few bits and bobs. Is a scene in Moonraker, the James Bond movie, where Jaws has big silver teeth and he smiles at the girl and she smiles back and we all remember having braces, and I remember having braces, but you never had braces. And that's a Mandela effect, where our memories are not serving us correctly. And it's the same with our careers and our aspirations and moving on with jobs and so forth. We're all we create our own reality around us, rightly or wrongly, for whatever reason why we do it. To make us feel good, to make us look good, to run away from a past, whatever it can be. And the career Mandela effect, over time, when we do that, and we've convinced ourselves that certain things has happened in these jobs, we have a false reality around us, and then because we've done that, in the future we then believe that is the reality, and we've forgotten that we've, I hate to call it, lied to ourselves, created the world around us. So we create this Mandela effect around ourselves. And I was speaking to a candidate which prompted me to make this video. Actually, a couple of times I spoke to candidates which helped me create this video. And these, as you talk about, especially when you've got nuanced roles and you need to get out of a candidate a certain skill, and you talk to them and you discover that along the way that they have got these skills and that they have done certain things, but because they created this reality around them, they've forgotten all about it. And sometimes we get CVs from people saying, yeah, I am qualified, but it doesn't say on the CV. And you give them a chance to look at it and you think, oh, actually, I haven't put it on the CV. Why haven't I done that? That's crazy. Why haven't I done that? It's because we created this reality around ourselves. Rightly or wrongly, by the way. Rightly or wrongly. No one's to blame for it. It's just the way we are as humans. So Lee and I talk about this, and we talk about memory, and we talk about how it works in engineering manufacturing, but other sectors as well, it works as well, and how we need to use technology more to help us. It's really good conversation. I really enjoy speaking to Lee. He's a really good guy as well. So I hope you enjoy. Hey Lee, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, Mark. How are you? This is
I'm good.
Where you are?
No. Yes.
Oh dear. Yes.
Yes. Kind of. It's shockingly bad. Oh my God. It's cold.
The sun's out, but it's cold.
Yeah. This is the great thing about us. We start a podcast talking about the weather. That's just us being pure British.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It is though, because in the UK, the weather, you could be in West Wales where it's like 22 degrees, or in Cornwall where it's like a tropical weather, but then somewhere in the Midlands North, it's snowing on the same day or hailing.
So A Chinese friend of mine, I always start with the weather. How's the weather? And she thinks it's hilarious because she says it is what it is, no matter where it is or where you are. The weather is just the weather. There's absolutely nothing we can do about it. So she says, "Why talk about it?" But you're
We're
right. It's
obsessed
a
with it.
British thing. It's a
We are
British thing.
obsessed. Yeah.
Mm.
And it's so like even like when I speak to candidates or even clients, it's always about the weather. The first 3 minutes of any conversation is always about the weather. I don't know what the psychology of that is, though. I'd love to know. I'd love to know. Oh man! But anyway, thanks for doing this podcast for me. It was really, really interesting when we had our little initial chat about why we're doing this podcast, and I thought, hey, no, this is a great idea that you've come up with, and definitely talking about it. But to kick it off for kind of everyone, you watched one of my videos that was talking about the career Mandela effect, which was
That's
we
correct. Yes.
we always look at our careers as moving in some sort of positive fashion, and when people are interviewed we talk about these things where oh yeah, the reason I left this job is because I got to the point and then I had to look for promotion, I couldn't, and then I moved to there, or it was about salary, or it was about stuff that people think hiring managers want to hear. But the reality is there's a journey that we all go on, and we forget about the journey where we will hit a dead end with something because of whatever politics, whatever it is in the workplace, and then we go off in another direction with our career, and then we're just literally bouncing about purely by the reaction that happens around us at the time. And
So for me,
you told me a great story about that.
yeah. So for me, when you was talking about this, it rang true about the psychology of memory. Would you
Yeah.
like me to expand on that a little bit,
Yeah,
Mark?
100% expand on it. That's why we're here.
Okay. So absolutely. So I was working for a contract company on a place called Salt End in Hull, and they
Mm.
called all the managers in and they told them the importance of basically writing things down and how the human mind and the memory works.
Yeah.
So it was about, they told you a story about a professor in Glasgow who liked to drink, and who would have thought? Okay, but
Yeah.
what he used to do, he used to go around the pubs and he had a tea towel and a tray, and under the tea towel he had 12 different items, and he'd say to people in the ale house of the time, he'd say, I want you to remember 10 of these things. Right now, the average human can remember between 8 and 12 things. And he said, I've got a minute to study it, and then I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. Then I'm going to ask you about the things
What?
under
Yeah.
under the tea towel. So what he'd do, he'd give him a minute to study it, and then he'd start asking them questions like, how many children have you got? Have you got girls and boys? And the person had to recall this in their brain. And how he explained it to me was the the man on Salt End, not the university professor. Let's just get that out there
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
So he said, it's like you have a row of balls on a rack, and then when you need to put another ball in, remember something else, one falls off the end. So
Yes.
that's how he used to do it. He used to ask them questions about where they lived. You know, they'd ask him if they was married, things like that, about the job. And then all these things they needed to recall, a ball dropped off the end. So then when he asked them to recall all the things under the towel on the tray, they couldn't, because they had to remember all these other things in the minute.
Oh wow.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
and it showed you all about this, and it told you about the generation game as well, and
Yes.
how the generation game, there's no surprise that there was always a cuddly toy and a fondue set. So when Bruce Forsyth or Larry Grayson, you're under pressure and he's saying, come on, think of something, it was a recurring, low value item that they'd recall when there was under pressure. And he did the same in the program. He talked
Yes.
to them for a minute after the conveyor belt had gone with all
He
the
did.
things.
That's right.
Yes.
Yes.
And that was the reason
Ah.
for it, to get you to drop all these things off. And the things you saw every week on the television on a Saturday night were the low value items that you auto recalled. So that meant you wasn't remembering an expensive item that was a fridge freezer that was a month's salary when the generation plan was on. But anyway, enough of that.
No, but you make an important point though with it, because the short-term and long-term memory, when you start recalling your long-term memory, it fills the void of the short-term memory, and what you've remember the minutes worth of that stuff is gone. And then if you refer that back to kind of with the Mandela effect and how we perceive things, we only remember the overall thing, not the actual detail of what's really gone on. It could be trauma, it could be just forgetting what the real reasons, it could be a lot of multitude of reasons on it. You make a really, really good point with that, with how we remember things.
Yeah, so just after that, the contract finished and I was looking for another job, and the company asked me about planning. Now, I'd done a planning qualification for Microsoft Project, and we're all quite vain, and we all think that we've got a really good memory and we're probably better than we are, right? So I'm thinking this will help me remember all this, and implementing CMMS at this company. Do you want to do the job? Yeah, I want to do the job. And it was only through that conversation that I got on the hook and I was interested with all these, bits and pieces. Doing using that software and things like that. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And it put my career on a different trajectory. It made my project management a lot better. It showed me how to write everything down. I used CMMS a lot more, and it was a bigger skill, and that put me up a notch in my career. Because do you know anything about CMMS? Yeah, I've implemented it twice. All right, okay, that's great. And then you went from companies and you implemented CMMS. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that means computerized maintenance management system. There's quite a few different out there. Yeah. But you can't remember to do everything. I don't care who you are, you can't. And I'm like, yeah, wow, this is brilliant, this. And I had the buy-in, and I was on the hook. And I always recall that conversation to try and get other people to engage in that.
And these bits of technology, believe it or not, really do help us remember stuff. I'm a massive one. I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but I use Google a lot to remind me to do stuff. So I'll have Microsoft coming off the back of a Teams meeting, that warns you and tells you what's going on. But in the background of that, I have about several Google messages or Google reminders telling me you've got to do this call now, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. Because I do know I need to do these things, and I do remember I need to do these things. But without it, God alive, I can never remember anything. It's like, I need to make a call at 10 o'clock. And this thing comes up at 5 to 10 going, oh God, it's 10 o'clock now. I know I need to make a call at 10 o'clock, but I just don't know where I am in time and stuff like that. With CMM, do you find that it takes over a piece of your job, your administrational side of your job, or does it do more than just that? Does it go more technical?
It does a lot more.
Yeah,
you can do a deep dive to look at breakdown frequencies and things like that. And it wasn't until I started on the journey that I really realized what it could do. So you can select, I'm sure you've heard of Charles Babbage, the pioneer of computing. He did the first computer, Lady Lovelace and people like that. So when I was a child, I made a shoebox with some papers in it, and I did the ring binders, and I guess this is all part of the Mandela effect.
Yes.
Okay, not just in the career but in life. So the pieces of card in the shoebox had hole punched holes through that kind of matched where the knitting needles went through the shoebox. And some of them had bits cut out. So then when you'd lift the two knitting needles up, it'd lift certain pieces of information up. Because I read this book on Charles Babbage, and I thought, I'm going to make one. And I made one out of cardboard.
Yeah.
But the CMMS allows you to do, again, that's part of the, not in your career, but in your life. It allows you to do the deep dive and filter information quickly, so you can get to where you need to be.
Yeah.
At the moment, the company I'm with, we look at machinery, and we look at the frequency of failure. So we look at how many times it's failed and what component has failed, and it allows us to plot our maintenance really effectively instead of guessing it. You don't always get it right, but if you still have breakdowns, or you don't have as many breakdowns, you can tail your maintenance off and use your labor accordingly. So it does a lot of things for you. And if you break down, you remember, what did I do there, or what did I need to do to order? You can go back to that. But as long as you put in what you ordered, and what you did, a few photos, and then the rest of it, you recall. Yeah, I remember now. But you still need
that prompt. Yeah,
it's still about that little bit of memory.
Yeah.
You know?
Which is really, when I do interviews with candidates, and sometimes I go as far back as 20, maybe 30 years, depending on the experience of the person. And you'll say, oh, what happened in your world here? What did you do? What did you learn? And suddenly they realize, oh, actually, I have done this 10 years ago, 15 years ago. How did I forget that? And it's quite extraordinary how we forget what we've done and what we picked up. And I said this to you before in the past. You glean throughout your career bits and bobs ready for your future career, but it's about trying to work out where that comes from and your experiences within it. And the Mandela effect really does affect us, and we misconstrue memory very quickly, and we think we've not done stuff, or we have done stuff. In reality, we have or haven't. It's quite extraordinary, actually. It really is. You've done quite a career trajectory, though, haven't you, with your career? Do you want to talk about that, or do you want to kind of hook around and stay where you are?
Yeah, and talk about it a little bit. When I first started, I never envisaged I'd be where I am now. I used to read books about project management on my break, and the other people, they used to come in and say, oh, you'll never ever be, you're one of us, who do you think you are, and things like that. And I took it upon myself to learn a lot myself, so I could go to people and say, oh yeah, I know a bit about that. And maybe sometimes, as we all do throughout our career, I gilded the lily and said that I knew a bit more than I did. And then I'd read maybe 2 more books on it and things like that, because I've said I can do this, and I can maybe do 80% of it. But my personality is that I always want to do 100% of it. And as much as that sounds good, it's bad as well.
No, I think a lot
through your career.
Yeah, but I think also a lot of people throughout their career are somewhere between 50 to 80% capable of doing that job when they move to the next job. So that last 20% is really down to the company teaching you how to do that role properly, training, going to college maybe, and like you just said, reading some books as well. So I think there's definitely something in it where, you call it gilding lily. I think it's being confident that you can do it, and you will say, yeah, I've kind of done something similar to this, or I've gleaned it throughout my career. I've done these things, and I feel confident that I can do this next stage, and that I can move to this next stage. And I think that's just generally people in general that can do stuff like that. However, there are limits. If you're not going to become a surgeon because you've never done that before, you may be able to use a knife, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know what I mean? It's I find it fascinating.
My current line manager, he asked me to set out the engineering department's goals for Q1 2024, and when I unveiled it, he had a big grin on his face and he was laughing. And I said, what are you laughing at? And he says, this is really ambitious. And I've always said, if you shoot for the stars and you land on the moon, and you need to be on the moon, because somebody's expectation who works for you is possibly, shall we say, a graph from 1 to 100. They may be 25 and you're expecting 100. And then you might meet somewhere at 50 where you actually need to be. So if you tell people I want that and you get 75% of it, then that's the ethos I've worked to.
Exactly.
With that.
That's and how you get the extra is really down to, right, where's the deficiencies in what we've done, where did we go wrong, and having that environment of rectification. It's not about you failed or you haven't done what you're supposed to do. You just maybe not had all the tools and training and development in front of you.
It's about openness as well. Throughout my career, I've always said that to people who my reports, always tell me, don't try and hide it, always try and tell me, because that's another thing about the Mandela effect. I've tried to hide things in the past and I've got caught out because you think, oh, I'm going to be in trouble, but sometimes, and you kind of realize that throughout your career. That's what you need to do. You need to be honest and say, oh, look, I hold my hands up. This is what's happened. This is how it's happened. But equally, I always encourage them to say to me, I want you to come with a solution as well. Tell me what the problem is, but tell me what you think the solution is as well. Don't just say, this is the problem and that's a problem.
That is a very good point. I remember when I was working for some big companies, especially in the engineering world, the MOD and so forth. They always used to coach you into always when you come with a problem, always come with a solution. It doesn't have to be the right solution, but come with a solution. And that mentality has always been throughout my career, for sure. And I think it does stem from engineering, doesn't it, really? Engineers are very curious people that always want to solve problems all the time.
So Mark, that's quite interesting, that actually, because I used to work for a firm that did a lot of work for the MOD, and the MOD always has somebody called a NEC contracts champion. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. So here we go then. So if you're late with anything, there's always it's clause, A19, and you owe us money, and you can't claim a compensation event and things like that. So the first 2 months was going down and having a meeting with the MOD down in Salisbury, and they were absolutely clipping us, right? So I said, right, I'm going to go on an NEC3 and NEC4 contracts course. So the next time he comes at me, I'm going to be ready. Right? So I'm going to be ready. So, we did these courses, I read some books again, drove down to Salisbury. There's this guy sat there, the NEC4 champion, and he's saying, right, no, you can't claim a compensation event because of clause, And I went, well, actually, that's not quite correct. Because I says, that's only applicable with clause, I can't remember what it was, and you're telling him, and his jaw absolutely dropped. And it was like, a really proud moment. However, then that shows you how to do the contractor waiting, tender documents and things like that. So there's a waiting process if you have 3 guys who come for a project, and it helped me in the future because I've been asked before, how do you select the correct contractor? Well, you do a tender waiting document. And then you look at, you put all these clauses in and you remember it from the NEC, and it helps you. And you say in an interview, well, I've done that. Okay, have you got any proof? Yeah, I've got this certificate for NEC4, NEC3. And then I tell them the story, because the story always backs. It's all right saying I've got the qualification. Again, the Mandela effect. but I've actually done it in practice, and this is how I did it in practice.
Yeah.
And this is why I did the qualification, because I needed it as
That's
part
it.
of my role.
Yeah.
And did I need it much for that role? No. Could we have got an NEC contractor in? Yeah, that would have cost a fortune, and it was my project and my purse strings.
Yeah.
So, I'm a northern lad, so obviously I don't need to spend that much money.
But it's like, again, it goes back to that engineering curiosity, doesn't it? Of learning how to solve problems. There's the problem.
Absolutely.
I need to solve the problem. And I was just thinking as you were talking then as well, about kind of the maintenance computer. It's almost like people have a version of that in their real life, which is a CV, but they don't put all the problems on there, or all the so that they can go back, not the problems, but the achievements and stuff. You may be able to want to keep a diary as well, of your career. But that comes back down to that Mandela effect as well, because you don't do that. What you have put in your CV, you then start to believe that is actually you as well. So so when you do those things like with the NEC contracts, you go, I have done this and I did this whilst I was doing it. But it's all down to how good you can really remember these things, though, isn't it? These little anecdotes and stories that you have in life. Really, it really does come down to that.
I suppose, yeah. I didn't even think about it, Mark, until your podcast, until your
My video
effect.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what, this is like really relevant to, I suppose, everyone's career. Absolutely. Absolutely everybody.
I made that video. I was interviewing I think he was an operations manager for a role. And we were, because it was such a varied role, there was so many bits and bobs in with the role that you wouldn't get someone that just walks straight into the role off the street and knew what they were doing. There was a bit like yourself when you look through your kind of your past and your career and what you've done. You've done chunks in different areas, and we put it all together, and that's the package of you going into that role. And as we were going through his CV, he was recalling things and conversations he was having and situations he was having. And we generally came to a point of which he couldn't believe he remembered things that, that's why I moved from that. Oh, and now I remember now why I did that. And now I remember why I did that. And I remember the Mandela effect is kind of a weird one. I don't, in the video, I talk about the movie Jaws, not Jaws, the movie Moonraker, James Bond Moonraker, and Jaws in there. Smiles at the girl and the girl smiles back. Yeah, and she's wearing braces. But she isn't wearing braces because we all, I don't know why we remembered her wearing braces. I don't know. And there's a few other things as well with that. And that's exactly like with your career. Why did I leave that job? And you remember the good things, but you don't remember the real reasons, good or bad, what that helped you move from that. And that's why I made that video. So it's nice to trigger someone about it. I never thought it would. I need to make more videos like this now. That's the thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that sometimes throughout your career, it's luck and you're in the right place at the right time. And at the time you can think you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. For example, a very good friend of mine that asked me to do some planning for an outage. We went on, me and my wife went on holiday for our first holiday after we got married, and she to book a murder mystery book.
Right.
Okay, well, she likes reading things like The Hobbit and stuff like that, and it's just really not my bag at all. So I'm taking a user guide manual, right, on how to use Primavera P6. So we're sat there on the sunbeds, right, in Madeira in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And she says, what are you reading? Hey, I told her, and she's like got fits of laughter. She thought it was absolutely hilarious. And she said, only you, Lee. And I don't know what I don't know what she meant for actually.
My wife says that to me, only you, Mark. Yeah, it's only you.
But, and at the time, he gave me possibly my first proper planning job to plan a outage. He actually contacted me while I was on holiday, on
Yeah.
that holiday, and he says, "We've got an outage coming up, and will you do it?" And it's only I was unemployed for a bit because the company where I was, my face didn't fit.
Yeah,
And he
it
always
happens.
tells me why my face doesn't fit, and I know why it doesn't in a few companies, because I this is one of my oldest friends and colleagues, and he says you'll always challenge somebody, Lee, if
Yeah.
they're not doing the job that affects your job. So if I ask somebody, can you do this for me? And by the way, I need it by X because this will affect A, B, and C, and if they haven't done it, I'll call them or I'll email them and I'll say, you haven't done this and I've asked you to do it. Can you tell me why not? And apparently people don't
But you
like
but you
that.
don't challenge people in a negative connotation.
No,
You challenge
absolutely
people
not.
always in a, well, this needs doing. Why haven't we done it? What can we do to solve the problem? Again, the engineering brain, let's solve the problem. And sometimes people feel that, I don't know, I've had this myself. People find that either
Robotic,
insultative
if
to
you
them.
will.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. That's it. And I find I've come across this many times in my career. I find a lot of managers hate being challenged because they always think they're right. And when I became a manager, I realized very quickly the stuff I did know and the stuff I didn't know. And the stuff I didn't know, I made sure I had people around me that knew how to do that stuff. And then I had to learn at the same time. And the same with
Um,
starting a business.
yeah. I mean, the organisation I'm with at the moment, we're doing a big push on OEE, and I thought I knew everything about, uh, equipment efficiency.
Yeah.
And some of these guys, they just blow me away. They're so advanced at what they do. So uh, I don't, I don't profess to know everything, but I want to learn it because
Yeah.
I'm interested. I want it to work better.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. As long as you go into those situations where you consciously know what you don't know,
mm.
or know that you don't know everything, you'll always come out to them learning something, and the person that's taught you that will always come out of it feeling positive they did something in that situation. It's when you're both going into a situation, you both come out negative, and trying to stop that kind of grinding. You know what I mean? It needs to be a two-way street. Management has to be a two-way street in that sense.
It's as I said, the clever cats, and I will remember it for the rest of my life. The way they do it. I mean, I've done the fishbone diagrams and things like that,
Yeah,
and flow charts with it, but this is so advanced, and what you think the problem is sometimes not the problem.
yeah,
Not the problem. You
yeah,
know. Mm.
yeah. Well, especially when you do the flow chart, and especially a lot of engineers can get in the way of their own ego, and they'll say, "Oh, it's the air filter that's the problem," or it's the piston rod that's the problem. And then when
Mm.
they go through the whole flow chart, oh, it's actually the fuel system. Oh, damn it! And they're inexperienced, and this is where the CMM comes into place, where they can then go back to these type of things. We can't remember everything. We're not
So,
robots.
Mark, in this podcast, I think it's time we had an engineering joke. Do you
Okay.
mind?
No, you drop a joke in. Do you know, sometimes, Lee, I know we've spoken quite a fair few times in the world over the last few years, and sometimes you remind me of Bob Mortimer. So I want a Bob Mortimer level of joke now. That's my
Okay, then. All
expectations of
right.
it.
No pressure then.
No pressure.
So there's an electrical engineer, an IT engineer, a mechanical engineer, and they're traveling along in a car. The car stops. The car breaks down, right? So the electrical engineer says, let's check the alternator and the spark plugs. The mechanical engineer says, let's check the fuel pump and the carburetor. So the IT engineer says, let's all get out the car, get back in and see if it starts.
Oh, it's a
And
classic.
everybody on this podcast can relate to that, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Every
yeah.
single person.
That's, yeah. You phone up an IT department. My computer's not working. Have you tried switching it off and on again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
fuck's sake. Oh God.
But
Yeah.
then again, there's a little bit of validity to that because 99% of the time that works.
Oh,
A
do you know
restart.
what? It does, yeah. Even with engines, let's be honest, you turn the engine off, let it sit for a minute,
Mm.
and then And it starts for some reason.
I'm assuming after that joke, I'm going to get a barrage of criticism on
Oh yeah,
LinkedIn by
but
thousands of IT engineers.
yeah, because the reason you're going to get loads of that, and you won't get many for electrical or from mechanical engineers, is because they're doing work whilst the IT guys are on the internet looking at LinkedIn all day.
Yeah,
Sorry, IT
I'm
people.
assuming
I'm
you never
joking.
recruit for IT
No,
engineers
I
on that.
don't.
Yeah,
No,
shocker.
don't go near them.
Yeah,
You know, my love is for the mechanical guys.
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh man. So would you say then, looking back now on your career, that it's steeped heavily in the Mandela effect, or do you think you have a good grasp of your career to date, and or you now becoming aware? God, yeah, these are the things that I should start saying about in the future if I ever go for other jobs.
Yeah, I think because you know, there's always the interview question. Name a time when something was difficult. So the NEC. So if someone asked me about commercial management, you know,
Yeah,
it's the same thing. You're answering the same question. Oh yeah. So this NEC 4 guy, you know, was like absolutely killing us financially on this, and I had to do something about it, and that's
yeah,
what I did about it, sort of thing. So I suppose when you go for an interview, that's another relevant thing. That's your Mandela effect coming out,
yeah.
because
That's fair.
you know you've got to answer something impromptu and really got to think hard. So yeah, and I think it does. But until the podcast, until your video, I never thought of it like that. I never really thought of your career as, and I did that because of that, and because of the way that company culture was, and I wasn't happy. You know, I'd actually done that in my job. But
Yeah.
then when I went to the next job, it enabled me to do X, Y, and Z. So yeah, and it's more prevalent than what most people think.
Yeah,
I'm sure it
exactly.
is.
It is. And also, there's a question in interview. You raise a really good question there about interviews. There's another question in interviews which should click in people's heads, but it never does, about why they're in that situation, why they're sat in that room. And it's always the question, why are you leaving your current role?
Mm.
And everyone looks at the manager and and then talks about the external factors causing them to be in that room. Things like, I'm not being paid enough, the management's toxic, or I'm being made redundant, or the company's not doing very well, I'm not happy with the job, the location. And those are external factors that some people don't have any control of, but they will use as a reason to move in jobs. And I always say to people, if you're not leaving a job because of these external factors are real, then look at the real factors that you're sat in front of that person. You're looking to expand your career because, very much like you discovered with NEC contracts, oh, this is really interesting. I think the next role I'm going to go for a role about NEC contracts. And then off you go in that different trajectory. So instead of you going to the next role and saying, oh, do you know what, I'm not being paid enough for what I'm doing, or the manager's a total loser, you kind of go, do you know, I really enjoy NEC contracts, and that's why I'm sat in front of you. I want to investigate more and see where this leads me with you, and my career with you. And sometimes that's more powerful, I think, in that situation, because you're trying to go somewhere, so you're not running away from something, you're running towards something. And they're trying to find a person that's not just going to fill the job because they need someone, but someone's going to take the job and run with it towards their kind of direction in which they want to go. And I think the Mandela effect really affects people in that situation. So, what advice would you give people trying to look at their career and move it forward, really thinking about the Mandela effect and all the other things that we've talked about today?
When you, if you want to move your career forward and the things that you've done, I would think about I would give it some time, because sometimes these things pop up when you're driving, or pop up when
In the
you know you
shower.
just, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, you just sat there and things like that. And yeah, that's it. You just think, yeah, you know what, I remember that. But
Yeah.
just that, you know, and it's not always when you need to think about things, you
Yeah.
know. It's not always when you feel you're under pressure and you think, I really need to focus about that,
Yeah.
and think more and more. If somebody says to you, name a time, what examples can I give? Always name a time, not when you're pushing when you want to push your career forward and think about what you can do. Always think about that question, name a time, and keep regurgitating that question.
And trying to rehearse it with what you've done in your mind, and try to be that step forward. That's a really good point, actually, because a lot of people are just not prepared, are they? They kind of just stay a bit lethargic. And that's, again, where the Mandela effect comes in. Then they look at the glean the best bits from their career, and they hope that's what the hiring manager wants to hear, and not the reality or the story of the world that they're in. But I agree with you there. It is stop and think about your career, isn't it? Really think about it. Sadly, it's this type of stuff that does keep you awake at night. Sometimes those type of questions.
You can think about why you left one role and went to another, and what the actual people, what the people, the people, and why you did what you did in that role, and what was the reason you did that.
Yeah.
But when you try and think about all these roles, you've got to focus about the other bits and pieces.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The people you worked with. Why did you work with those people? What did you get from that person? What did you need to do to fit into that role? So if you're looking for the next stage, look on the internet and see what the roles and responsibilities are.
Yes, very good.
And things like that.
Yeah.
And think, how much of that is relevant to me, and how much training do I need to give myself?
Yeah. And also, what was the outcome? What happened? Because sometimes people glean the things that worked and not the things that didn't work.
Yeah.
Because the things that didn't work is equally as good as the things that did work, sometimes better. The things that didn't work. What did you learn from that? Oh, well, I learned this time I'll do it this way, which is a person then is willing to accept responsibility and accept that there's other methodologies to do things. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. Awesomely, where can people find you? Is it on LinkedIn, or do they have to go to a pub or something?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn. Yeah, I like LinkedIn. Contact me, send me a message. I talk to people from all walks of life. If anybody wants any career, advice, or how to get into engineering and things like that, I'm happy to help.
A perfect guy to speak to, actually, about engineering careers. Definitely. Well, Lee, thank you very much for your time with this one. You're the first engineering manager, or director, I should say, that's wanted to do a podcast with me, and especially on a subject that is so far off there, but is reality. It's reality that we live in. So thanks very much, mate.
Well, Mark, one more thing before we go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, never done a podcast before.
Yeah.
This is my first one. So you could say I was a podcast virgin.
I've broken your podcast cherry. No, that's all right. I always find them really enjoyable to do. I think if you can get on a podcast, great. But try to get on a podcast that doesn't grill you. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, sure. Ebb and flow of conversation.
Yeah, that's what it's about.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did, recording with Lee, and it just made me remember that I really need to do more podcasts, and I need to make some more time to do them. If you're listening to this and you are in the engineering technical world, I'd love to have some podcasts with you guys. And it's not just talking about manufacturing and engineering, but it'd be great if we could. But also about you, and this is what the podcast is about. It starts with you, and I love to talk to some people about their career and how they got to where they are as well, and obviously touching upon that Mandela effect. That's at least once, but that'd be great. But just hearing your story, hearing where you got to, why you did it, where you are right now, and where you're going with it as well. It'd be great to hear that, and just generally talk about stuff and create these podcasts. I get a lot of people coming to me after podcasts. Sometimes I recorded a few years ago saying, "Oh, I just listened to that podcast with so and so, and it was really inspiring." And you don't know how inspiring it is until you've recorded it sometimes. And people do listen. It may not be thousands of people, but people do listen, and people do pick up on certain things, and I know I do when I listen to podcasts. So I really hope you could reach out if you want to, and thanks to Lee, and I really hope that you enjoyed this and you continue following for furthermore. All right, take care, bye.